I'm joined by David Littleproud, who's got Water Resources. Thanks for joining us, David.
Great to be with you.
I want to talk to you about issues of drought and water in just a second, but first up, as a Cabinet Minister, just the general economic outlook. We're all waiting on this interest rate decision today, which the very fact that they're waiting on it when interest rates are 1.5%, the cash rate at least, shows the precariousness of the economic situation. And then an announcement that's just bobbed up on the Australian website that Telstra are looking to wind back 10,000 indirect jobs over the next couple of years. Having snared the election victory, you're confronted with some really big economic challenges in the coming year or so.
Oh, we are, but we've done the heavy lifting over the last two terms with the Prime Minister, who was then the Treasurer, and now Josh Frydenberg. Our job is to put the environment and infrastructure around our people, to let them create the wealth that creates the wealth for the nation, and that's what we've done. There are some headwinds globally that we're going to have to face up to, but we've got the framework now within the economy to be able to weather that. It's going to take stewardship of this economy. It's going to take disciplined stewardship, and I'm sure that we've got the credentials to continue on that journey to make sure we get it right and we bring all Australians with us. We empower Australians to do the heavy lifting through this, because invariably if we do that, our nation grows from it.
What about the argument that in order to get some more sustained economic growth into this economy, we've got to do more productivity reform, we've got to generate higher productivity? That might mean some more reform in structural taxation reform rather than just fiddling with income tax rates. We might need to even look at more industrial relations reform to free up the labour market further. Are you looking at these sorts of issues in the term ahead? Because unless we lift productivity, we're going to lose national wealth.
Well, look, productivity is always an important component of the economic story, but if we empower small businesses to put more money back in their pocket through tax cuts, and as someone who used to own a small business, let me tell you, if I got money back in my pocket, I didn't keep it there. I spent it and reinvested it back into my business and employed more people, developed my business further, make it grow, and that's the sort of story that we want to do. Is we want to empower the Australian people, the business sector, to go and do that. Invariably, small business, I know as an owner, we used to go and make sure that the productivity continued to improve year after year. Governments can't interfere entirely. We need to make sensible, methodical changes. We are expected at the moment, the mandate that we were given is to continue on with the stewardship that we've started, not to spook the horses, but to get on with the job and entrust us with good economic stewardship and making sure we can pay the bills, but making sure we're giving Australian business and Australian families the opportunity to get ahead.
Now, you're concerned about the drought and managing our water resources. Is the cold snap of this week bringing any decent rains to some of the more heavily drought-affected areas?
No, in simple terms it isn't. And the reality is one rain event won't break a drought. It's going to take 2 or 3 average seasons to get our farmers back up on their feet. And that's why we've made a strong commitment, not only in looking after farmers in the here and now, nearly $2 billion in support, not only for farmers but communities, because it's not just farmers that hurt, it's also the communities that support them, the small businesses. So we're trying to make sure that we keep them going through this. But then the Future Drought Fund, we'll put into the Senate when we get back a $5 billion future fund that'll pay a $100 million dividend in the good and bad years to make sure that we give our farmers the tools to equip them to be able to get through future droughts and prepare them properly, and working with the NFF and state agricultural bodies to work out what a drought policy fit for the future looks like, with that as a centrepiece, a dividend paid down to empower our farmers to be able to get through a changing and adapting climate.
Haven't we dropped the ball in this country in the last 50 to 60 years when it comes to water storage? I know the NFF are pushing for a $3 billion plan to upgrade dams in New South Wales, but right up the east coast, aren't there far more opportunities to build dams and store water, whether we use it for pumped hydro schemes in the meantime, but certainly in order to further drought-proof the nation?
Well, Chris, let me make this clear. It has never, ever been the responsibility of a federal government to build dams or water infrastructure. It has always been the responsibility of the states under the Constitution, but they've done bugger all. So the reality is we put a $3.2 billion plan up we said to the states, come and get it. We're going to put our hand in our pocket. We're going to partner with you because you've done nothing. Let's get things moving. Let's get D8 and excavators going. And in fact, in my own electorate yesterday, we announced an extra $5 million on top of the 42 to build Emu Swamp Dam. We're going to put 56% of the cost down. The growers are going to put 30%. We're waiting on the state government to just kick the tin for a little bit, even though it's their responsibility. We perpetrate our own misery in this country by saying why we can't do things rather than say how can we. And that's the mindset we've got to change. We're doing that with a cheque. We're saying $3.2 billion, come and get it. Proudly, the Tasmanian government is probably the only state government that said, we'll take a piece of that. And we've opened up a couple of dams down in Tasmania in the last 6 months. But it's important that the states live up to their responsibility. They abrogate their responsibilities too much these days. They use us as an ATM. It's time that they took up these responsibilities. We start digging some holes and we fill them in the good times so that we can use them in the bad times. And lo and behold, we can grow regional Australia and agriculture.
Talk to me about those state responsibilities and federal responsibilities. We desperately need some federation reform in this country. But sticking with this issue, then how pie in the sky is the so-called Bradfield Scheme that would dam a lot of rivers right up into Queensland, in North Queensland even, and feed them down through river systems so that they eventually actually feed into the Murray-Darling system and, of course, feed all the irrigation areas in between?
Yeah, and this is what Michael McCormack, as the Infrastructure Minister, has started to do around the national water grid, is to identify where the opportunities are. Now, whether it's not necessarily just the Bradfield Scheme, I think it could be an iteration of it. We need to dig the holes, particularly in northern Australia, where there's significant rainfalls in short periods of time, to catch it. And then how do we use the smarts of the 21st century to distribute that where it's in excess? And that's how we have to look at this, is to how can we, rather than just coming up with the reasons why we can't. And Michael McCormack is put his money where his mouth is. He's got $3.2 billion. Part of that is with me, for the $2 billion Regional Infrastructure Corporation, to make sure that we can empower local communities to tell us what those water infrastructure projects are. You don't want a Canberra solution. We've gone out with $300 million and said to local communities, tell us what water infrastructure you need that will develop agriculture, develop your regional communities and be able to get a triple bottom line. We can do it. We can use the smarts of the 21st century to do it. We've just got to back ourselves.
There have been dams proposed just in the last decade in Victoria, in New South Wales and in Queensland, major dams. They've all been knocked off because of local complaints, environmentalists complaining, those sorts of things. I mean, governments in the end need to make a decision and be able to follow through.
Well, we've got to have some courage, and we just saw on the 18th of May, the silent majority sometime comes out, and I can tell you that's what they want. They want governments, no matter it's local, state or federal, just to get on with the job. They don't care who delivers the outcomes, they just want it delivered. And it only makes sense that we're in the middle of a drought. Now's the time to build that infrastructure. And, you know, this dam in Stanthorpe, in my own electorate, a town of just over 6,000 people, will create 700 new jobs. That's 700 new families that will come to a small regional community.
So we
talk about decentralisation.
You're guaranteeing, David Littleproud, that by the end of this term of government, in 3 years, you will have added water storage reserves to this nation significantly?
Well, we can only do that if the states allow us. I can go and dig as many holes as I want around this country, but I can't fill them. The reality is the Constitution was set up by our forefathers that said that the state governments own the resources. And what we've said is you haven't done anything. So we have put our money where our mouth is and said, come with us. We can start Emu Swamp Dam. I can have Emu Swamp Dam up and going within 6 months. I can have D8s and excavators there tomorrow. We've cut a cheque for $47 million of the $84 million. The growers are going to put in $24 million. So we're just asking for $13 million odd from the state government and the approvals to get out of our way and to get on with the job. And you know what? 700 new families to a community of around 6,500 people. That's an enormous injection by a federal government, an investment in regional Australia that has a significant return, not only for that community but the entire nation. Yeah, thanks for joining us, David. We've got to get cracking on these projects. Appreciate your time. Thanks, mate. Great to be with you.